Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Doom Mixtape. So this is continuing on in my series of playing maps by relatively or completely obscure authors. This map is from the set Joy of Mapping 4, and I showed a map previously from Joy of Mapping 6, but the Joy of Mapping is basically like a map jam, like game jam in the Doom community, led by Jimmy, who's done a lot of music and many projects. And the whole point of Joy of Mapping is it's supposed to be like the Joy of Painting. I'm wandering around the hub area for this right now, but this was the summer themed one, and it was done in summer 2017. So the first few Joy of Mappings had about 20 people participating, and the maps were made in a day. But this one, they increased the map time to a week, which they then lowered to 3 days in 5 and 6. But this is really when the thing started growing. And the whole point of Joy of Mapping was that they gave feedback to help improve the maps much more actively, versus in the context of a regular map jam, which oftentimes map jams are like a few hours or a day or whatever, but this one was a whole week. So that's why the scope is higher for a lot of these maps. So this is a map that I personally like. It's called Cathedral of Rot, and it's in the third episode. It's by Lord Shadow Z. I have not seen a single other map by this person. So for all I know, they may be like me in that they have one release Doom map and it's in a Joy of Mapping set. But this is one where I was watching, I think I was watching like Alfonso or somebody play through this set. And this is one where I was, watching it on the stream, and people were like, "Oh, I don't like this map." And I literally was watching it and being like, "This map is awesome," at the same time that someone on commentary was like, the person who was streaming was like, "I don't like this." So I feel like that happens a lot. I don't know why, but I eventually got the inkling to play through this set. I really like Joy of Mapping 4 and 5. They probably did this for the earlier ones, but 4 and 5, they started to divide them into episodes, and each episode had a different theme. For 6, it was the one that I participated in, and the one that I showed a map from Gabu Maru, was just themed after the original Doom episodes. But this one, they had different themes, and the theme for this episode was Green Hell, and another one was like autumn themed. I really like the idea of Green Hell. This map, it's called Cathedral of Rot. I guess the main like archetype for this design is this basically like a giant like internal area that's supposed to be some kind of cathedral or some kind of like trippy mansion or something, that then around the outside there's various like extraneous bits, and I always just like this kind of archetype for a map, and I feel like this map does it really well. I wouldn't even say like the individual areas inside the quote-unquote cathedral are that memorable, more so that they're like, it's a very interestingly shaped and textured and detailed level. And I'm pretty rusty with Doom. I feel like when I'm playing this map, or maybe it's just that I don't normally play maps that I haven't, played before for these videos on ultraviolence, but I'm gonna die a lot. So because this is probably my second time playing through this map outside of like watching that video and playing through it once. These sets are surprisingly good. Like the Joy of Mapping, they might as well be a Doom megawatt in my mind. There is some level of quality control in that like some basic fixes are made, but it's mostly, by the authors. But I like a set like this because you can see people, especially people who are new, like perhaps this author, I don't know, approaching things in a way that other people in the Doom community wouldn't approach them. This has like really interesting shapes, like the kind of weird diagonal shape here. It's going to later open up and reveal an arch file and two arch files and cyber demon, which is not going to be good for me because actually the shape of the room makes it very difficult to dodge them. There's also I probably should have wandered around this map a little more once I pick up the computer map at some point, but I didn't do that. But anyway, yeah. So what's the deal with deciding to talk about a map that has only made by one person in a random Joy of Mapping set who hasn't done anything else and doesn't seem particularly beloved? I don't know. So I have like my own internal compass on like what makes a good map, and it seems to be oftentimes different from what other people think. I think a lot of people in the Doom community are very focused on the individual combat encounters, and I think for me I want something that has a vibe to it, a very distinct vibe where you can pick it out of a lineup of a lot of different things. And I've talked about this, I complained about this on a lot of Doom mixtapes, of there's this general thing in a lot of community map sets of people just making rambling hallways and various abstract rooms that connect together, which is admittedly how the original Doom, a lot of it was designed, not all of it. And Doom 2, but there's no real sense of place or anything like that. It's just all abstract, and it's focused on the combat encounters, and to a lot of people that's what Doom is. But as I've said many times on this this series, like that's not really the primary thing of what Doom is for me. It's more of a venue to explore 3D space, and the combat is kind of the treat that helps you have a way to engage with that space, in my mind. I mean, I view it in the same way I view it as like something like Mario 64 or something, except the way that you engage with the space is completely different. This is kind of weird here. Like, it looks like you're supposed to shoot through. This wall will open up later. But like, this is a place where I got lost. There's a lot of chain gunners and a lot of revenants in like weird places in this map. I think it's because of all the textures and all the confusing like sort of non-orthogonal rooms, which I really like. Means that it's kind of hard to tell where enemies are and where they're firing from. I think that adds to the sense of confusion and disorientation, which I really think this is that kind of map, which is very, very much, hell as embodied by Doom. That's like what it's about, to me. You don't necessarily know where you are in like the orientation of everything. I just like the details in this map too. Like I said, there aren't necessarily individual parts of the internal part of the cathedral that are like super duper memorable, but the whole experience, I'd say, is memorable. Anyway, yeah, so I just kind of wanted to think about like what makes a good Doom map and what makes it something that I consider worthy of talking about. For me, it's something that has kind of an implied, not necessarily stated narrative behind it in the most loosest terms possible. I mean, there are maps that try to echo a narrative, but that's not even necessarily what I'm talking about. It's that the overall experience gives you a feeling of something or a sense of something. It feels like it has an identity. And it's funny, like that isn't even necessarily true for a lot of maps in the original Doom and Doom 2 especially. And so, people are going to approach things the way that they want to. But for me, like, if I'm going to spend time engaging with the output of, a community and a bunch of quote unquote amateurs, not in a derogatory way, but then I'm not gonna, then I wanna like get my focus in on the particularly unique voices or whatever, and Doom map design gives you the opportunity to do that because everything is usually made by just like one person. It's actually, I've been playing this game called Trackmania, which is like apparently big in Europe. I think it's made by a Swedish company, but there was a new release and it's like a free game, but there's paid content on it. But it has a huge fan community and like a track editor and everything. And that's another one of those things where you can see the archetype of like fan communities. That's also kind of like a long-running thing. Certainly not as big as Doom, but like, or as centralized. But the user releases run the full gamut of quality, and the often cliche that happens is user releases kind of come with this sense of like, well, you played the base game, you like it, so you want this other thing to be harder. But for me, like, I kind of look at these things as an end unto themselves, and oftentimes as things that surpass the original. And as we know, as many people know, harder does not necessarily equal better. In fact, it often doesn't. So then, so then what is, the value of these things? Like, how can we assess, like, their worth? Is it like, what is the point of you playing it if you're not playing it because you want something harder or more challenging than the original? For me, it's like, maybe you just want more of the original. Maybe you want to see somebody. For me, honestly, it's not even like, I mean, I do like the base game of Doom. I'm familiar with the Doom community, and I followed like, user WAD first-person shooter kind of communities for forever. But so that's a big reason for me. But I think the other thing is like, there is a personal voice, a personal authorship that comes out in these things, and it's so hard to make a video game, and it's limited by so many ways you have to construct or build these things. So if you can really see somebody's personal voice, personal like flair coming out in these game, in just the design of a space, where almost everything is like kind of a default setting. Although that changes when you get into a lot of Z-Doom stuff. And this WAD, by the way, is a GZ Doom WAD, but it is like a provided set of textures and mostly default enemies and all that kind of stuff. But if someone is able to express something very unique in that setting, then, what could they do in another setting? That's kind of exciting to think about. And, I just don't generally think that we think about authorship in video games like a lot. Maybe it's coming from like indie games, and that idea is more obvious to me as something reflective of a personal voice or personal idea. But it also just kind of takes away the myth that like you have to be working in these creative industries and like working on a mass product, and it has to be part of an expensive game. And the processes behind making a game that are institutionalized or made official are necessarily contribute to a better or more exciting experience, when on the other hand there are people who are making things with almost little oversight, maybe sometimes feedback from the community, which is always helpful, of course. Well, not always helpful, but is often helpful. It captures something more unique and more distinct than a lot of mass marketed products, which might be more stimulating in the scale or the scope, or might have some interesting new mechanics or whatever, but the overall experience isn't one that it's as memorable. I don't know, I've seen a lot of, I know Doom 2016 was very, very popular, but I've seen a lot of like backlash forming to Doom Eternal in particular, and a lot of people saying that they just felt like it was kind of bland, or there wasn't a distinctive feeling of beyond just the general combat of Doom 2016, which of course that core is interesting, and it took people off guard when that game came out because they didn't expect that the game would go back to basics and just try and be dumb and silly again. But it's not really possible for a lot of those AAA games to have that same sense of authorship for individual maps. A lot of the time, because there's too much oversight happening for those like kind of happy accidents to happen. And I don't know, it just became obvious to me when I played something like Dusk, especially Dusk, which does have a unique, like each map feels kind of unique and distinct to itself, which, at the time that Doom came out was certainly viewed potentially as a liability, because it's just a random assemblages of things, and it's not a overall coherent experience. That's of course why I like sets that offer a whole coherent thing. But on the small scale, like, it's rare to find somebody who's collectively one person or a collective group of people who's making something with the intention of it being a real deal, coherent, developed, fully articulated experience of sense of authorship and everything like that. It's hard to make a full megawad by one person. I mean, people have done it, but it's more rare, and that's kind of why I'm almost more interested in the like little bits and assorted pieces that are available in in like maps like these, where it's like, this person is probably, I mean, maybe they'll release a full megawad, probably not, but I'm interested to see there's something going on here, and it's captured thanks to the mechanisms of this community, the fact that people produce so much stuff, and there's joy mapping and all that kind of stuff. But it just probably won't exist in any other form, which is why I think it's worth talking about as an end unto itself, because it's something that we might not ever see again. And as somebody who's been around a lot of people who have made one or two things that are interesting, but they've been just discouraged by being involved with the industry. They don't have the patience to either develop a full game, or the arguably the skills that you learn making Doom maps. I think they'd be useful and applicable to the game industry in general, but it's certainly not viewed that way as it was, in the late 90s or whatever. So, these are people who are by and large never going to enter the industry. I think I mentioned Pinchy in the episode that I did about the Alphonzone. I got really freaked out by this ambush here. I did not expect that, because I've only played through this map once. It's funny, like, how I feel like I have decent reaction time sometimes when I'm just totally surprised by something, because your like adrenaline kicks in. I don't know, it's something I've experienced when playing like Trackmania, for example, where I can react pretty decently the first time I'm playing a map, but then the next several iterations I screw up because I'm like trying to, I guess, test the boundaries of it, or I think it's easier than it actually is because I'm not reacting to it with like adrenaline. Yeah, so I picked up the yellow key, and there was that one room that kind of reminded me of the Wailing Horde with the little columns, and I had to enter from a teleporter area involving like a series of switches. There's a nice little details here with the brick. That's a very like, PWAD thing. Like, I'm going to detail out the individual bricks of this texture. In this case, it doesn't look too rambly. I really like the way that this map uses vines too. So here's the like side area. This area is fine. I don't know. It would be cool if there was just some other outpost or extension of the, of the cathedral here, instead of just a separate kind of slightly more slaughtery area. But this map becomes more that way. you know, it is what it is. I don't think the combat in this map is perfect, but I probably wouldn't have reacted to as strongly as if I played this before I recorded, or I was playing on Hurt Me Plenty instead, which I often do for these videos. So yeah, I just have to pick up the red key eventually and return to the center. I think this will open up the center area of the cathedral, which will then release the archviles and, you know, the cyber demon, whatever. I think a complaint that I have playing user Doom mods, as much as I like, you know, and being high-minded about it, you know, the flip side is it's like sometimes you play these things and it's just like, why am I doing this? Because you just see the same monsters coming up again and again, the same kind of encounters, the same kind of escalation in maps. Like, okay, here comes the like 2 cyber demons and billions of archviles, and it's like it's not used with a kind of in a kind of artful and tactful enough way, and you're just expected to shovel through it. So there's the specialness of it is eliminated. Because the novelty is gone anyway. I mean, you're already used to everything. So that's, I don't know, that's the kind of depressing side. There's really a lot of limitations. And those limitations become more and more obvious the more you like engage with this stuff. But on the other hand, I think that the fight with the limitations, the fight with that just like, you know, reliving past moments or, you know, just being a re-articulation of the same ideas that are like, you know, 20, 25 years old now, 25 plus years old now. That like struggle is something that I think is actually pretty interesting. When people, you know, attempt to engage with that in a kind of authorial way where, you know, there's some kind of acknowledgement of that, even, you know, if it's done through very subtle means, because it's always like, you know, it's hard to, I mean, I'm sure there are more narrative-based Doom maps, especially like maybe Z-Doom maps that are more didactic or something that are, but generally, like, it's fairly impossible for a Doom map to be didactic. It just is what it is, and you get out of, you know, the experience what you get out of it, which is, you know, one of the many reasons why I keep following Doom maps. As someone coming from, like, you know, indie games where there's so much stuff that is just the most didactic. And the most like telling you how to feel, and the most like look how deep and prestige this is of anything. I mean, and there are a lot of AAA games that kind of vaguely fit into that category or try and be that while they're trying to be a, you know, a fun, violent game at the same time, and that never really makes any sense to me, or very rarely. Yeah, so there's like these extra hallways that extend out. I always like the lighting effect of, like, even though there's no like source of the light, which is kind of weird here, the like lighting effects on the staircases. There's a map by Sfera Kvernmo, I think it's called Time Gate in Doom Eternal, that does that. No, sorry, Eternal Doom. God, see, now I'm confused them. Anyway, I'm attempting to murder archviles and cyber demons right now, but yeah, we're about to enter into the worst offender as far as things that make me die endlessly. It is really hard to dodge in this area, like really, really hard. I think it's because the texturing is so kind of eclectic and colorful, which I do like as like a representation of hell, although, you know, one critique that I could have is that I think the rooms should be more distinct from each other. But, you know, that's the author's personal style. I mean, there's a lot of... I could critique every single map that I like, virtually, for something that I don't like, or something that I, you know, But that's the kind of cool thing. I mean, not that I mind that there is a community to critique these things, but as I've said many times before, the values and ideas of particular communities, creative communities, can form so specifically around particular ideas and become so coalesce into something that everyone's just making things for the same 10 people, and it just becomes a regurgitation of the same ideas over and over again, so the same tropes and things come up. And that is definitely a problem in the Doom community. The fact that it is so big and there are at least a few different outposts at least helps. And, you know, a few different countries and stuff, you know. In the case of like Russian Doom community, people who have a language barrier, a lot of whom, and so aren't necessarily as shaped by the mainstream idea of what a map should and shouldn't be. And I don't know, this is actually like a general problem with the game industry and way game design is taught, but like there is oftentimes a lack of reflection how values are carried in different design principles. There's just things are objectively assumed to be the best thing, and you know, so in the case of like teaching game design, something like that, there are a lot of industry values that are inherently supposed to be the most enlightened, most, not even most enlightened, but like say most optimized version of why you should, where, how, and why you should do things. That actually might just be counterintuitive, and even when they do work, don't necessarily work at all when they're transposed onto things that are radically different from each other. Although I'd argue that they often don't even work on their own terms. There are plenty of like AAA games that I still kind of am interested in, but as far as things bearing like the mark of, you know, a designer, a specific designer, a specific authorial voice, I don't have much of any faith of that happening in like, you know, 98% of AAA games, outside of something like Death Stranding, I guess. I like the vines in this room. And, you know, of course, making a Doom map isn't the same overarching complicated thing, but that's why it's accessible to more people. I like the checkerboard texture that is used at part of this. Yeah, there's just a lot of like good details in this map, like the weird shape there. This is an interesting exit. Something like, again, I don't know, maybe I should just try and make a map like this, because I do like the style. And I do actually like kind of jumping around on different platforms and navigating, and there being some punishment, but it not being like a full punishment to falling. And in this case, this map does that, where you can teleport out pretty easily, but you have to run to do that, and you're gonna probably be damaged quite a bit, 20-30%. This map, there's also a lot of, you know, far off enemies that are just hard to hit with things. I also just don't have a BFG, and I'm like, here it's a difficult, kind of a sticky situation, because I have to climb on those little platforms in order to get over there to where I can actually kill those guys. So I have to be paying attention to where I run, and I can't really do that. You know, if it's a normal hallway, I can just dodge projectiles and run at them. But here it's, you know, it's not so easy to do that. I have to get very lucky. So I have to kind of awkwardly try and kill them from a distance when there aren't like necessarily great cover points, because there's enemies coming from multiple angles. So yeah, this is an interesting exit. And then I'm teleported right after this to an area where it's like really under fire, and you have to really move quickly in order to exit, which I actually kind of like. I think that's a pretty cool idea for an exit to the map. This is kind of a map where when you spent so much time in the internals of the cathedral area, you kind of want the exit to be elsewhere. Wish there was a little bit more health though, although I might have missed something. there might have been a secret right there, but you know, I'm not about to go back and explore when I'm pretty much done with this map. So yeah, well, I hope Lord Shadow Z makes other things. But I would definitely check out the Joy of Mapping sets, particularly this one 4 and 5 and 6, really expanded and vastly. You need a newer version of GZ Doom to play them. You might need a specific version to play 5. I don't know. I've had trouble getting 5 to run, but you probably are liable to find a map like this, you know, that stands out to you. I'll probably play one more after this, actually, from Joy of Mapping 6, which I've already talked about. But there's another map that I wanted to talk about, again from an author who I haven't seen much stuff from. Yeah, I love the music here and the nice rays through the sun, and it is the summer. We're getting to the end of summer. So hopefully at least people, you know, you all got to spend time in the park or something, even though it's been a depressing summer. But yeah, that was Cathedral of Rot, Lord Shadow Z. Definitely check out Joy of Mapping 4, 5, and 6. And I'll be back in the future with another video